Welcome to Makers at Home here on Makers Women. My name is Lilliana Vasquez, and I will be hosting today, filling in for our favorite Dylan McGee. We're going to be talking with Daniella Diaz from CNN, and I'm so excited to introduce her to all of you. For those of you that don't know who she is, she's an incredible producer, journalist. She's a fellow Texan girl, a South Texan girl at that. And she's going to join us now. Let me quickly invite her into this chat. There she is. Hi.
Hi, Liliana. How are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you.
I'm so glad we're finally doing this. I'm sorry it's been so crazy.
Well, say, here's the thing. At Makers, we are full disclosure, so I'm going to be fully transparent with all of you guys. We have been trying to get Daniella here with us since Hispanic Heritage Month, which ended back in October. But she is living life on the campaign trail. And as you can imagine, these last few months have been incredibly hectic. Actually, the last 4 years have been incredibly hectic, but the last few months for sure. And she has been so busy working and following this election for all of us. And so we finally have her here today. And I'm actually so excited that you're here now, because I actually think this is an even better time to talk about so many of the things that are important to you and important to the people here at Makers as we start to see this transition happen for us. We're so excited to see all of the changes that are happening. We're excited to get your opinion on what's going on. So welcome everyone to this edition of Makers at Home. Now, Daniella, I told people a little bit before you joined us, you literally crisscrossed the country. I'm actually curious how many miles you have logged since you started covering Senator Warren.
Thousands and thousands. I stopped counting after a while. There was a day that I drove 600 miles, I think. Not one day, one campaign swing. And at that end, I was just like, I'm never counting again. This is too overwhelming to count.
It's overwhelming. Honestly, sometimes, I'll watch you guys and I'll start in the morning because you are an incredible producer and journalist at CNN. And when I turn CNN on in the morning and I see you, or I see, some of your partners there, I see you in 3 different places throughout the day as you guys update throughout your hits. And I'm thinking, how in the world do they maintain this schedule? But I think it comes with a passion and a dedication to what you cover. And, I've been reading about you, and your dream growing up in McAllen, Texas, on the border, we're a fellow Texas girl, was to cover politics. Where did that come from? And were you always politically active or active in your community? Where did that passion come from for you?
Yeah, Liliana, it was I always loved news and I always read news. I never understood that this could be a career for me. It was I grew up in McAllen, and we have a daily newspaper that I worked at, but it wasn't I was told you can be a reporter, you can go and cover national news if you want to. So I started small. I started with my local paper, love my local paper, endorsed the Monitor News, daily newspaper. They hired me when I was in college, and I covered local government, which is how I think is a great way for a lot of people who are interested in politics to start. I started covering city council meetings and random referendums and random things like that. So I did that for about a year as an intern and then as a full-time reporter for my daily newspaper. And then I did this program called the Bill Archer Fellowship Program. It's a state school program in Texas. Any person that goes to public school at a Texas public university can do this program. It's incredible. Shout out to the Bill Archer Fellowship Program. I did that, lived in DC for a semester, interned at NBC News. And then I got a job at Politico, covering politics, and then I just stayed and then joined CNN, and it's now almost been 6 years. Next February will be 6 years for me.
Wow.
It's been a dream come true.
Here's what I do know. I always say this, when people ask for your timeline or your bio or your resume, when you say it out loud, it's and it was this, and then this, and then this. But as somebody who has spent the last decade working for major media, I know how difficult this road is, how challenging it is. And I especially know how challenging it is when you come from where we come from. And I heard you touch on that a little bit, growing up in McAllen, both of your parents, Mexican, immigrants.
Yep. Both immigrants from Guadalajara. Well, they're both from different areas of Jalisco, but Guadalajara, yeah, my entire family's still there.
And so when you were growing up and you shared this passion with your immigrant parents, what was their reaction to the dreams that you had as a little girl?
I think at first it's this anxiety my parents have of like, okay, well, she's going to pursue her dreams, but can she, it's not that they don't think I can do it, but it comes from this background of, we come from families who are not familiar with these experiences. They didn't grow up around this. My parents, I mean, I'm the first of my family of like any person that I know in my family that's in journalism. And I don't think it was a matter of my parents were, they were incredibly supportive, but it was like, you know, what typically comes in this industry is, you know, someone, or your family friends with someone, or your parents work in the industry, or whatever, or you go to an amazing school where all your professors worked in the industry. And that was, none of that was the case for me. None of that. So it was, I think, a little anxious. They felt anxiety, but they supported me from the very beginning. And even if they couldn't, you know, help me with networking or anything, or finance, you know, anything that came with me trying to pursue my dreams, they were always my rocks, like both my parents, especially my mom. And they're still my number one fans, and I'm so grateful. And it's like incredible to have their support, because I couldn't have done it without them. And then I'm grateful for my perspective, because I'm bilingual. I'm from McAllen, Texas. Immigration has been a huge part of my life, just in my personal life. And I'm able to bring that entire perspective of my background and like being bilingual and my family and everything into what I do, because it's like, it's who I am. It's what I grew up around and what I know. So it's like, not only am I covering these issues, but I've lived them. So it makes it even, I'm a better reporter for it.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say to you. You know, I think right now we're seeing how valuable and how it's impossible to tell our news stories without somebody who has lived that experience and has seen that experience with their own eyes. I think when you bring in reporters that have a varied background and a diverse background and represent all of these diverse communities that make up who we are as a country, you're getting an authenticity in these stories that I think wasn't there for a long time. And I think that's so inspiring about how you are as a reporter and a producer and a researcher, because you're right, you do bring a perspective that nobody else has. You're the only person that has that, you know, and to see that, I know for me as a Latina, is so important to see that, especially as you see our stories make national headlines. You know, to be able to tell that with empathy and experience is very different than having somebody come in from, you know, Northern California or from Iowa and come tell that story. It's just different. And I'm so happy that news organizations like NBC and CNN are really seeing the value in that and opening up, like what you said, the opportunities to kids that don't have those direct connections, that don't have parents that can pick up the phone and get them an internship. I think her story is inspiring, especially to so many young men and women who want to pursue this as a professional career, thinking, well, no one in my family has ever worked in media, let alone at a newspaper or at some place like CNN. But to see your story gives them hope that, hey, you don't have to have a certain pedigree. You just have to have a passion and a determination and a work ethic that's going to put you in a position to earn that type of role. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Elizabeth Warren's campaign, because you covered Senator Warren. And I hope that in a few years, I never have to ask this question again. But as a woman covering another woman in this election, how did that make you feel when you first got that assignment?
You know, it's still historic, isn't it? That a woman is running for president and we have female reporters covering the women running for president. I agree with you. I hope one day it's not a historic thing. But right now it is, and it still probably will be for a while, until we probably have a female president. And, you know, I feel like as a woman covering Senator Elizabeth Warren, I was able to bring in that perspective of like, I know what it's like to be a woman trying to break into this industry dominated by men. She's a senator from Massachusetts. She was a professor at Harvard. You know, we're in journalism. So I was able to bring that. But I also feel like, there's a lot of confusion, I think, with being a woman, covering a woman, where you think you're going to be biased toward them or give them a soft pass because they're a woman and you relate with them. But that's not how it is. If anything, I'm harder on her because I understand when I ask questions, and my questions sometimes relate to her being a woman in a way that sometimes men won't ask, which is important because half this world is female, right? So I think it made me a better reporter to be a woman covering a woman, and I was able to bring that perspective in and ask really important questions to her every time she gaggled, which is a way that we say she spoke to reporters. She did daily gaggles, or daily, you know, she would take questions from reporters daily. And I am like, it was incredible to be able to be on the front lines watching her run for president and covering that, the history of that as a woman, as a Latina, It was incredible.
It's amazing. Now, and you have such amazing photos on your Instagram. I could literally spend, I mean, I'm such a, I admire Senator Warren so much. And when I was on your Instagram, I think that's actually how I like originally found you, because I'm so passionate about the work that she does and who she is and just who she is as a person on this planet. Like, we are so lucky to have somebody like her. And I saw this photo of her drinking a milkshake. And how,
Yeah.
what is her go-to milkshake flavor?
I'm trying to remember what she drank that day. I think it was like a strawberry shortcake flavor. I remember the day perfectly. We were in New Hampshire. She was meeting with a local state rep. She went to this place. I mean, we love photo ops as reporters. We love these, like, you know, moments where we can catch them being human, catch the politicians, like not so much behind a podium, but in person, talking to voters. We love that, right? So it was a time that I actually got to, you know, photograph her, shoot video of her, because that's what I used to do, is run around with a camera. And I remember right after, we were all like, what'd she drink? What was the flavor? Did she like it? You know, like, that's sort of the question, you know, it's just the stuff that we care about as embeds, when the little details are all we pay attention to.
Well, it's what to me, it's what humanizes candidates, right? Like, we see them, we know what they're going to say. You have an idea, you get to know them so well, but I do think it's those personal moments that make us at home, you know, as constituents or as voters, say, okay, you know, I can connect with this person on a human level. And I love that you bring so much humanity to that. Now, you mentioned something about running around with a camera. I think for so many, we see you now. There you are in front of your gorgeous CNN background. But life isn't always so glamorous on the road, especially covering an election, whether that's a government election locally in a state or whether it's the presidential election. How did you get your start? And were you the kind of classic one-man band where you started? And what were the skills that you think allowed you to grow into the position that you are in now?
Liliana, the only reason I am where I am is just because I worked really hard to get here, period. Like, I just hustled, and I was humble, and I'm still humble, and I'm still working so hard, and I still put in the time. And I feel like the reason I got to where I am, and as an embed, was I always looked for opportunities. Like, that is my biggest advice to anyone who wants to, in any job, not just journalism, pursue their dreams. It's, you have to ask for opportunities. They don't just get handed to you, ever. We know that. And it's not a matter of, oh, they'll notice me. They'll notice that I want to do this job. No, you have to ask to do the job. And you can already, this is actually from my mother, Patricia Diaz. She taught me this. I've known this my entire life. You already have the no in your head, right? So you already have, okay, they'll just say no. But you know what? I'm going to ask anyway. And I already have the no in my head. Ya lo tengo en mi cabeza. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have the no. So, like, yeah, my mom taught me that, and I apply that to every part of my life. I always ask for opportunities. I always ask to do more work. I always ask for, if there's a job I'm interested in, I apply for it. This is true of me in college. I was applying to every program I could get into, every scholarship that was available. This is true for me even now. I just feel like that's why I've gotten as far as I have and been able to succeed. And I try to tell everyone to follow those steps as well. And these skills, I mean, I didn't know how to use a camera. I learned that, right? But you can't teach me how to work hard, how to put in the time. Those are skills that people have. So that's my advice to anyone that wants to pursue a career like this, or any sort of career that's ambitious, and a lot is about how much work you put into it.
And in those situations, you know, I always feel like so many of us are in those situations where, like, listen, I have the know-how, but do I have the confidence to ask, right? Because I think that's where you got to have the confidence. In those situations when maybe you don't know, maybe you're new to picking up a camera, you're new to editing, whatever those skills are at your job, how do you kind of, how do you get past that fake it till you make it and actually make it? Like, what do you tell yourself in those moments to say, I might not be the best shooter, I might not have the best camera or editing skills, but you know what, like, I can do this? Because I think for so many of us, I know for me, you know, I hear the word imposter syndrome come up all the time, where you just look around you and you think, okay, they're just going to realize that I'm not supposed to be in this room. I am not supposed to be sitting at this meeting. And they're going to be like, Liliana, could you please leave? That's never happened to me, and I'm sure that has never happened to you, but that doesn't mean that that idea doesn't live in our head and plague us with insecurity. So how do you get over that? And do you have any advice, especially for young men and women, that are kind of taking that next step or looking to take that next step in their careers?
I want to normalize that. That's what I want to do
I
because I
love.
still have that. I think that we have to be okay to live in our fear and live in being uncomfortable and just keep doing what we're doing, being uncomfortable, right? So like I still feel uncomfortable when I'm tossed on new assignments, when I'm tossed on new things that I have to learn and become an expert on in 5 minutes, which is a lot of my job, right? Like, I in my example is I covered Warren during the primary, and then I had to switch and cover Vice President Mike Pence. I went from covering a progressive Democrat to a conservative Republican in the administration. Then now I'm actually covering Congress. I'm currently at the Capitol covering the House side of the Hill. So we have to be okay. And I'm constantly feeling imposter syndrome. I don't know if I'll ever not feel that, like I think I'm always going to feel that. And that's part of who I am and like why I've been able to succeed and get as far as I have. And I feel that I've learned to be okay with being uncomfortable. I've learned, and that took a lot of time. That,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of it came too is that I learned that my failures are not failures. It's just one bad day. And
Yeah.
then the next day I get back up and I do the same thing and it won't be as bad of a day. I'll make mistakes. We all make mistakes and we're not perfect. And in your job, you're going to make mistakes and we have to be okay with that. But I guess the point is, this is another thing that I apply to my life. This is from my professor, Dr. Selber. He went to University of Texas. He's now at University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, but he told me never make the same mistake twice
Oh,
because that means you didn't learn from your first mistake. So if you make
right.
the same mistake twice, you didn't learn. So I loved that and I apply that to my life because I always feel imposter syndrome. I'm always learning. I always feel like I'm not even sure if I'm supposed to be where I am or if I'm meant to be here or if I deserve to be here, but I'm going to apply everything and I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. I'm
I
going to learn new mistakes to make
I
because that
think
means I learned from my old mistakes.
brilliant, and it takes a mistake and it completely shifts how you look at it, right? Because it's not a mistake, it's an opportunity to learn, right? That's it.
Exactly.
Learning a new skill, you're learning to not do something, and that is incredibly valuable because that's how we grow and get better as human beings. Like, forget the
Mm-hmm.
work, right? Like, you think about that. That is brilliant advice, and I think it does frame things up in a way that does make you feel more confident when you are starting to feel like, I can't do this, or every like synapse in my body is saying no, but everything around you is saying yes. And I think that can be so hard, especially I think when you are the first to do anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? The
Right.
first, or when you're the only, that's a lot of weight to carry on top of the weight of doing just a good job.
Mm-hmm.
I I want to talk about the HBO Max documentary On the Trail. If you guys have not seen it, please watch it. It's so good. It follows you and several other female reporters during the 2020 election. For people that haven't seen it, what can you tell us about this?
It's a great movie. It's very raw. I think you see me crying a couple times in it, and it's very real. It really shows what the work is that goes into covering a presidential campaign. I feel like a lot of times Americans feel very detached from our election system, or they don't feel like it affects them personally. So a lot of times that's why people don't vote, or that's why people don't care or say they're not going to vote. And I think that this documentary is a beautiful, amazing way to see that people like anyone, like I'm just like everyone else, and here I am covering an election, and I'm trying to get the news to CNN so that CNN can put it all out to everyone who tunes into our coverage, reads our articles. And it's a whole operation. There's a lot of work that comes into covering a presidential campaign. And it shows every step of that. And I think, especially this time around, we had a lot of amazing, talented women covering this election. And that's a first.
Yeah.
This industry has been dominated by men, predominantly white men, for a long time. There have been books written about how these men covered these elections. And for the first time, it's all these women. And not only women, but women of color. And they're all so freaking smart. And they're so amazing. They're juggling families, they're juggling lives, they're working 24/7 to bring the news to people, but also living their personal life. And it was an honor to be in it and to be able to show my own piece of my story as like a Latina from McAllen to my family, to my parents, with my life, bringing my perspective into this job.
For sure. And let's talk a little bit about that. How do we encourage the places that we work, or the people that we influence in our lives, to bring more diversity, both in front of the camera, but also, I always say, like, the really big impact happens behind the camera, because I'm sure you've sat at many meetings when you're pitching stories and ideas, and you're the one that raises your hand to say, hey, listen, there's this really valuable story coming out of, I spent a lot of all my summers in Del Rio, Texas, but on the border, there's a really important story coming out of Del Rio or McAllen or Laredo, and I want to tell that story. And you say it and you're passionate about it, and, you get like, okay, well, not today. Right? And you always are looking for those allies. I know I'm always looking for allies in the room to say, hey guys, that if I'm bringing this up, it matters. So how do we get more representation of diverse stories, not just Latinx stories, but Asian stories, Black stories, Pacific Island stories, LGBTQ stories? How do we ourselves encourage that at the places that we work, but also push for that representation?
Well, first of all, we have to diversify our sources, right? So a lot of what a reporter does is who they talk to. So even if you're a white reporter in DC, you should be talking to diverse people about what matters, right? The second of all is we need to mentor other people to bring into our companies and bring in and diversify who's in that meeting, who's in that room. And the more you do that, the more likely our coverage will be diverse. And I think that it's important to not only have mentors of people that are diverse, like in the sense of, like, I have a lot of mentors that are people of color, but also mentor other people of color. And I find that those two things really have helped over the last couple of years to bring diversity to all the companies I've watched. I helped so many people that went to my university to try to get journalism jobs. I've, tried to connect with editors that are people of color, because I see the value of having them listen to my pitch versus maybe someone who doesn't understand what I'm pitching and why it matters. And I think that those two things are crucial, and we're not there yet, Lilliana. Like, it's going to take a while. But do I think we're better than we were 5 years ago? Yes. Do I think that we're better than we were yesterday? Yes. I think every day it's getting better, and I'm optimistic.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think I saw it, especially when I was watching on election night, as they were going out. I remember looking at, who they were tossing to, and I remember seeing names. And I always get really happy when it's a name that I can't pronounce or a name that I haven't seen, because that is progress to me. I'm like, oh, I like this reporter. It's just, there's comfort in that, because that person is new, that person is getting a shot. And I thought that was really special as we really wound down the election in those last 2 weeks. And all of us were watching news because we found voices that we connected to, whether they represented our community or who we were, or whether they gave us insight into a different community. And I think that's what's so important about having diverse voices behind the camera and also in front of the camera. It's not just about seeing yourself represented, it's understanding the diversity that makes up this country and being able to come with empathy to their stories and letting them tell you those stories. And I do think that things have gotten a lot better, but I agree with you 100%. We've taken baby steps, but we're at least heading in the right direction, because there were many elections, even the last one, where I thought, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like the country that I live in. This is not reflective of what my community is. So I'm happy to hear that on your end, you're also seeing that as well, because I know you're in there. Now, you had a pretty incredible experience a few months ago. You were actually, like you said, you started covering Vice President Pence. You flew on Air Force 2. Then something happened. Did you fly home on a completely different plane? I need to know about this, because these are the kind of stories that I'm like, I cannot believe this is Daniella's life. Like,
I can't even believe it's my life either sometimes.
Please tell us what happened and what was that moment like, and what is being inside that plane like?
It's really interesting. First of all, reporters don't get Wi-Fi. I didn't know this until I started covering Pence. I don't understand why it's not more public, but I tell everyone. So
Okay.
when I get on the plane, I don't have access to internet. I don't know. The world
It's
could be on
gone.
fire and I would have no idea. It's only if Pence's team or would tell me. But yeah, I was on the plane and when we were taking off, we heard like a noise, it sounded like a but like a what's like an explosion, but that sounds terrible. It wasn't that bad. It was just like a boom. And no one else on the plane. I sit with the staff, we social distance on the plane, but we're all next to each other and no one, acted like anything was weird. So I was like, okay, well, this is my first time flying on the plane. I've now flown a couple times since then. And I was like, oh, this is interesting, but okay. And then the staff came to me and they said, so we're turning around. We were in Manchester, New Hampshire on our way back to DC. It was like 9 p.m. and they're like, we're turning around and we're going back to Manchester because one of our engines broke. And I was like, okay, should we be concerned? Like, you ask all the questions that you ask, but you're also on the plane, so you're personally affected. And they were like, no, we're fine. It's just for abundance of caution, which it was. Everything ended up being fine. But yeah, a bird, we soon found out we hit a bird taking off. And this is now the second issue that the vice president has had with a plane. When he was campaigning with President Trump, or then nominee Trump, they skid on ice in New York. And he also had an issue where like the plane, they were on the ground, but they skid and it was a whole thing. So this is his second time with a plane issue and I was on it, but everything was fine. The fun part was when we got to Manchester, we actually boarded a cargo plane, which is like a plane that they use to transport all of the vehicles for Secret Service, but they emptied it out and put us on it. And it was like a military plane. And I had never been on a plane like that. And it was really cool to see that up close and see like how the military operates and how they do all of that. And of course, when a vice president is on a plane, it's immediately called Air Force Two. Fun fact. So that became Air Force Two. And I'm really glad we were all safe and everything was fine. But yeah, for a few moments I was like, oh, okay, like, is this gonna be fine?
I think about this and I cannot believe that this is literally like your day to day. That in the future there is a book of these stories because
Oh yeah.
we would love to hear more. And so that kind of leads me to my final question, which is, having experienced such incredible moments in politics and in news, what is next? Like, what is the next dream? I know your first dream was to cover politics in this incredible country that we live in and call home. What is the next dream?
This sounds so cheesy, but I'm living my dream. And I get to do that every day. And I get to tell people stories and cover things that affect everyone in this country. And I feel like it's an honor to be here and I don't take it for granted. Although I also recognize I worked really hard to be here and I deserve, to enjoy and embrace that. And I do. And I'm just so blessed to be able to do this and be where I am. And that's why I take it so seriously and I try to amplify other voices and try to have other people also be able to follow. If this is their dream, I want to help them. So we can have more people like us, Lilliana, in these roles. But yeah, I'm lucky. And for the foreseeable future, I'm here covering the Hill. It's an honor. There's a busy week ahead of us. We don't know. There's a COVID relief plan that's in talks. There's an omnibus that they're gonna, vote on, but we might not get there this week. It's crazy, and I cover every minute of that, and it's a blessing and an honor, and I'm so lucky that I get to do this.
Well, we are so lucky to have you bringing us this information and this news through your eyes and your point of view. And for everybody that's watching and for the Makers family, Daniella, where can we see you? Where can we follow you?
So I'm very active on Twitter, which is Daniella Micaela, which is the same as my Instagram. That's my handle on both Twitter and Instagram. And I love social media. I post all the time. I show my work. And that's like the best way to keep in touch. And I read all the DMs. I read everything. So if you guys want to message me, I read those messages. Don't worry. And I'll respond to the ones that are nice.
Yeah. I think that is a great policy. If you're sliding into anyone's DMs, it should be with kindness. Okay. Yes. Let's all start there. Well, Daniella, thank you so much for taking the time. I hope that we get a chance to check back in with you. I think we have an incredibly exciting 2 months ahead of us. I know that you're going to be covering it all for us. And thank you for your incredible hard work, and thank you for being such a beacon of light for so many young men and women that are across South Texas, and across the country watching you live your dream. I think you make it a reality that we can all do it. So thank you. I appreciate you. And I will be watching for you on my screen and, of course, on Instagram, because I stalk your Instagram account.
It was an honor. What a pleasure to speak to you. I feel like I'm in the presence of like an incredible woman, and I'm so grateful.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful holiday season. Stay healthy, please. And don't work too hard. I know you've got ahead of you.
Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.